Picture this, a quiet city street, 2:17 a.m. A corner store's CCTV watches everything with that cold, unblinking stare. A robbery, a struggle, a suspect fleeing. Police pull the footage, prosecutors build a timeline, and everyone thinks the case is airtight. Then a digital forensics analyst pauses on a single frame, one fraction of a second that doesn't line up with anything else. A reflection in a window, a car tail light, a timestamp that jumps when it shouldn't. Suddenly, the entire narrative unravels. Tonight, we're going to follow a case where one frame of CCTV footage doesn't just raise doubts, it breaks the timeline completely. We'll see how cameras record, how timestamps lie, and how tiny details can overturn what looks obvious. By the end, you'll never look at security footage the same way again, and you'll understand how fragile that so-called video proof really is. In this video, we're unpacking how CCTV evidence is really built into a legal timeline, and how a single frame can tear that timeline apart. We'll walk through a fictional but realistic robbery case, inspired by techniques and failures seen in actual investigations. Along the way, you'll see how frame rates, compression, and even the angle of a camera can quietly rewrite the story of a crime. We'll talk about what investigators look for, what defense teams attack, and why judges have become more skeptical of surveillance footage than you might think. If you're into true crime, digital forensics, or you've ever watched a grainy clip on the news and thought, that's all they have, this is for you. If you find this kind of breakdown useful, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives. And stick with me until the end, because the final twist in our case comes from a place almost nobody checks first. Let's start with the scene, a small 24-hour convenience store on the corner of a busy intersection. Inside, 3 CCTV cameras, one above the counter, one near the entrance, and one covering the back aisle. Outside, a city-operated camera points generally toward the intersection, capturing passing cars and pedestrians. At 2:17 a.m., according to the official report, a masked person walks in, brandishes a weapon, and forces the clerk to open the register. After a brief struggle, the suspect flees, heading east along the sidewalk. Police arrive within minutes. The only supposed eyewitness is a taxi driver who says he saw someone running, but he can't identify them. Everything about this case hinges on the timeline: when the suspect entered, how long they were inside, when they left, and where they went. On paper, the CCTV footage seems to support a clean, straightforward narrative, until someone decides to look closer at the exact timing of those frames. To understand how one frame can break a timeline, you need to know how CCTV video is actually recorded. Many people imagine it as smooth, movie-like footage, but most security systems don't record 24-30 frames per second continuously. Instead, they often use variable frame rates, motion-triggered recording, or low frame counts like 5 to 10 FPS to save storage. Each frame is stamped with a time, but that time doesn't come from some perfect atomic clock. It's usually pulled from the recorder's internal clock, which might not have been set correctly and might drift over days or weeks. On top of that, compression algorithms like H.264 only store full images occasionally, filling the gaps by recording just changes between frames. So what you see as a smooth clip is actually a reconstruction. Missing frames, jittery timing, and even apparent jumps can all happen without any tampering. That's crucial when someone later says, "Look, the video proves this happened at exactly 2:17:03. In our case, detectives initially treat the footage like gospel. They scrub through the interior cameras and mark the key events. Camera 1 shows the suspect entering at 2:16:45. Camera 2, over the counter, captures the confrontation. Camera 3 shows the suspect exiting at 2:17:30. Outside, the city camera records someone running across the intersection at 2:17:40. They stitch this into a narrative. The suspect spends 45 seconds inside, then runs east, matching the taxi driver's statement. The timeline looks so clean that during the first briefing, an officer literally says, "We've got it all on video." That phrase becomes a sort of shield, but nobody has yet asked, Are all these timestamps on the same clock? Are there frame drops? Is the outside camera synchronized with the store's system? In many real investigations, these questions come late, sometimes only after a defense expert challenges the supposed certainty of the footage. The first crack appears when a junior analyst compares the store's footage with the city camera. She notices that when a specific car passes the intersection, distinctive dented rear bumper, it appears at 2:17:10 on the city feed, but that same car's headlights show through the store's front window reflection at 2:17:05. If both systems were perfectly synchronized, that 5-second difference shouldn't exist. Now, 5 seconds might not sound like much, but in a case where every second is used to argue who could or couldn't be where, it matters. She flags it as possible clock drift, a common issue where independent systems slowly fall out of sync. But when she maps more shared events, door openings, passing buses, light changes, the offset isn't consistent. Sometimes the store is ahead by 3 seconds, sometimes behind by 2. That inconsistency suggests something more complex than a simple, steady drift in one badly set clock. To decode what's happening, we have to talk about frame rate and dropped frames. The store's DVR claims to record at 15 frames per second on each camera. In reality, under motion and storage pressure, that often dips lower. When the recorder is overloaded, multiple cameras detecting motion, writing to a nearly full drive, it can skip frames to keep up. Each save frame still gets a timestamp, but those timestamps don't always represent evenly spaced real-world time. The system might jump from 2:17:04:80 to 2:17:05.60 while labeling them as 2:17:05 and 2:17:06. It looks normal to a casual viewer, but you've just lost 0.8 seconds. Multiply that across dozens of small jumps during intense activity, and a sequence can appear longer or shorter than it really was. So when detectives say the suspect was inside for 45 seconds, they're often trusting a system that no one has actually tested under real load conditions. Compression creates another layer of confusion. Most CCTV doesn't store every frame as a complete image. Instead, it saves a full frame, called an iframe, every so often, then fills the gaps with partial frames that record only changes, like the suspect's movement or flickering lights. When you scrub quickly through footage or export a clip, software sometimes re-renders what it thinks the motion should look like between those reference frames. Fast movement, like someone running past the camera, can smear across several frames or appear in slightly shifted positions. In our case, the suspect's arm seems to reach for the cash drawer at exactly 2:17:12. But when the analyst examines the raw stream, frame by frame, she sees that the clear, fully rendered arm appears only on an iframe that actually corresponds to a slightly earlier moment. The system's display time and the underlying data don't quite agree, a subtle disconnect that becomes critical once lawyers build arguments around a specific second. Now we get to the one frame that breaks everything. While comparing the interior and exterior videos, the analyst pauses on a frame where the suspect is stepping out of the store. In the glass door behind them, there's a reflection of the intersection, small, distorted, but recognizable. At that exact moment, the city camera's footage shows a car entering the intersection's crosswalk line, but in the door reflection frame, that same car is already halfway through the intersection. The difference in position is too big to be explained by angle or lens distortion. It represents roughly 2 to 3 seconds of travel. Yet both frames bear nearly identical timestamps, 2:17:32 on the store footage, 2:17:31 on the city camera. That's impossible if both timestamps accurately reflect real-world time. One of them is lying, or more precisely, one system's internal clock and frame timing are so off that its timestamps can't be trusted as evidence. Once that conflict is spotted, the case's comfortable certainty evaporates. Defense attorneys seize on the discrepancy. If the store's timestamps can't be trusted to the second, can they be trusted at all? Could the suspect have been elsewhere at the moment the prosecution insists they were inside the store? In court, this becomes a battle of experts. The prosecution's witness argues that the differences are minor, just normal drift, and that overall the sequence still makes sense. The defense expert counters with a detailed reconstruction, mapping every shared event between cameras, charting the inconsistent offsets, and demonstrating that the store's DVR appears to resync its clock unpredictably. That one conflicting frame, the door reflection versus the street view, becomes the centerpiece. It's a physical impossibility encoded into the footage itself. The jury doesn't need to understand codecs or frame interpolation. They only need to understand that two things can't be true at the same time. Beyond timing, CCTV carries hidden metadata that can either support or undermine a timeline. Professional forensic tools can extract information like the camera model, firmware version, resolution, bitrate, and sometimes even internal log entries showing when settings were changed. In our case, metadata reveals that the store's DVR had a scheduled time sync task, intended to correct its clock using a network server. But that server was misconfigured. Instead of gently correcting drift, the system occasionally performed abrupt jumps, snapping the clock several seconds forward or backward while recording. Those jumps don't always show up as obvious glitches in playback. To a viewer, the video looks continuous, but the underlying timestamps skip. When the analyst overlays the metadata-derived sync events onto the timeline of the robbery, some of the most important actions, including the suspect's supposed exit, occur right as one of these clock corrections hits. The human factor complicates things even further. CCTV doesn't live in a vacuum, it passes through people's hands. Officers retrieve the DVR, a technician exports clips, someone edits together a highlight reel for briefing or the media. Each step introduces opportunities for mistakes, or worse, quiet manipulation. In many real cases, shortcuts are taken. Only relevant segments are exported, original file structures aren't preserved, and sometimes recordings are re-encoded, stripping or altering metadata. When a defense expert later asks for the native files, they receive edited MP4s instead of the raw proprietary streams. In our story, an early export combined two interior camera angles into a single picture-in-picture view, slightly retiming one feed so the actions appeared more synchronized for easier viewing. That composite clip found its way into the investigative file and, at first, into the prosecution's evidence bundle, until the underlying asynchrony was discovered and had to be explained away. So how do professionals properly verify a CCTV timeline? It starts with preserving the original recording device or, at minimum, making a full forensic image of its storage, bit for bit, including deleted sectors and system partitions. Then, analysts test the system under controlled conditions, set up a known accurate clock, and record events at precise times to measure how the device's timestamps drift or jump. They also look for external anchors, TV broadcasts visible in the background, smartphone screens showing the time, passing trains that can be tied to schedules, even lightning strikes that match weather data. Each of these real-world events can be cross-referenced with the video's reported times. In our case, when independent experts finally reconstruct the entire night using these methods, they conclude that the store footage's time base is unreliable by several seconds around the crucial moments. The city camera, by contrast, remains stable, pushing the court to doubt any narrative that claims second-by-second certainty from the store's system. Let's pull out the key lessons from this story. First, CCTV is powerful, but it's not a magic truth machine. Frame rates, dropped frames, and compression all distort how time and motion appear on screen. What looks like continuous real-time video is often a stitched-together illusion. Second, timestamps deserve as much skepticism as eyewitnesses. DVR clocks can be wrong, can drift, and can be abruptly corrected, creating invisible jumps. Without independent checks like external clocks, reflections, and cross-camera comparisons, second-by-second claims are weak. Third, metadata and chain of custody matter enormously. How footage is exported, whether raw files are preserved, and who touched what along the way can determine whether evidence survives cross-examination. And finally, sometimes a single frame, a reflection in glass, a light changing, a car's exact position, can reveal contradictions that no one expected. One frame won't always solve a case, but it can absolutely break a timeline that everyone assumed was solid. If this walkthrough changed how you think about CCTV footage, here's what you can do next. First, don't take any video clip, news, social media, or courtroom exhibit at face value. Ask, what's the frame rate? How accurate is the clock? Has this been edited or re-encoded? Even simple questions can uncover huge uncertainties. On this channel, we break down digital evidence, timelines, and investigative techniques so you can understand what's really happening behind those grainy clips you see online and on TV. If you want more deep dives like this into phone records, location data, and other forms of modern evidence, make sure you're subscribed and that you've hit the notification bell so you actually see future episodes. Finally, drop a comment. Have you seen a case where video seemed obvious but later turned out to be misleading? I read through your stories and often use them as inspiration for future videos. Thanks for watching, and stay curious, skeptical, and informed.